Ethan Cole was a man who had everything. The name, the company, the numbers that others dreamed of. But that night, the numbers didn't mean much. His driver had insisted he visit the hospital after a minor accident near the construction site. A few scratches, a small cut, and yet here he was, standing in the corridor of St. Clair Hospital, waiting for his report while life quietly moved in the rooms around him. He watched nurses rush past, their shoes squeaking faintly against polished floors. The smell of antiseptic mixed with coffee, tired, human, real. He wasn't used to real. Then he heard it again, that soft laughter. It came from a room with its door slightly open. Inside, a young woman sat on her bed, reading aloud to a little boy whose arm was wrapped in bandages. Her voice was warm, a melody that cut through the hospital's dull rhythm. "Are you a doctor?" Ethan asked gently from the doorway. She looked up, startled, then smiled. "No, just keeping him company until his mom comes back." He noticed her eyes, tired yet shining, the kind that carried both sadness and strength. There was something familiar about her presence, something that tugged at the part of him he'd buried beneath deadlines and board meetings. "You shouldn't be here," the nurse interrupted softly, stepping in to adjust the boy's drip. "She's a patient, too." "A patient?" Ethan repeated. His gaze drifted to the girl's wrist, a thin hospital band with a name written in neat black ink, Lily Harper. She laughed again, trying to make light of it. "Just tests. Nothing serious. You're the one who looks out of place here, Mr. Shu Tentai." He smiled for the first time that night. "You caught me." He handed her the coffee he hadn't touched. "You look like you need this more than I do." "Thanks," she whispered, fingers brushing his as she took it. It was a small touch, but it left something behind. A spark, maybe, or a question he couldn't yet name. The nurse returned with papers. "Sir, you can collect your report at the desk." But Ethan lingered. "Do you need anything?" Lily shook her head. "I'm fine. Go take care of yourself. Billionaire." He blinked. "How did you?" "Your car. I've seen that model only in magazines. You don't exactly blend in here," she teased. Ethan chuckled. "Maybe I like not blending in sometimes." She looked at him then, really looked. "Then maybe, for once, you're in the right place." He left her room that night with a feeling he hadn't felt in years, humility wrapped in warmth. Outside, as he waited for his driver, the nurse from earlier approached quietly. "You seem like a kind man," she said. "Just, if you visit her again, don't make promises you can't keep." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, eyes flicking to the clipboard she held. "Some names on our list are written in red ink. Hayes is one of them." Before Ethan could ask, she walked away, leaving him with a chill that not even the warm city lights could chase away. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her laughter echoed in his mind, tangled with that last sentence. Names written in red. He searched her name online. Lily Harper, 27. Nothing much appeared except an old fundraiser for medical bills 2 years ago. The photo showed her standing beside a little boy, both smiling despite the hospital gowns. The caption read, "Hope lives here." Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, his wealth felt useless, like a key that fit every lock except the one that mattered. He knew he shouldn't care. He had meetings, contracts, an empire that depended on him. But somewhere between her laughter and that red ink, something had shifted. And when morning came, he found himself driving back to St. Clair Hospital. No appointments, no reason, just a feeling that maybe he was supposed to be there. The same nurse spotted him and frowned. "You again?" "I brought flowers," he said, awkwardly holding them out. "For Lily." The nurse sighed. "Room 213. But be gentle today." The test came back. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped in. Lily looked up, weaker than before but still smiling. "Back already?" she teased softly. "You really don't give up, do you?" He sat down beside her, unsure what to say. "Maybe I just wanted to see that smile again." Lily tilted her head, studying him. "Then promise me something. Ethan, if one day you can't find me here, don't be sad. Just remember that laughter you heard." He swallowed hard. Why would you say that? She smiled faintly. Because not all names stay on the list forever. Her words hung between them, gentle, haunting, and full of meaning he didn't yet understand. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest. Comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. Ethan didn't sleep that night either. The sound of her voice lingered, soft, defiant, beautiful in its fragility. The words, "not all names stay on the list forever," echoed like a quiet storm inside him. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he could feel it carried weight, something beyond casual talk, something heavy. The next morning, he returned again, this time without flowers, without pretense. Just him. The guards already recognized his face and nodded him in. When he reached room 213, Lily wasn't there. His heart skipped. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice sharper than intended. The nurse behind the counter sighed. "Relax. She's in the garden." The doctor suggested fresh air might help. Ethan found her sitting beneath a magnolia tree, the hospital courtyard quiet except for the rustle of wind. She looked smaller in the wheelchair, a blanket tucked around her legs, sunlight bouncing off the strands of her pale hair. "You came back," she said, smiling without surprise. "I said I might," he replied. "I know. That's why I saved you a seat." She patted the bench beside her, and he sat today. For a while, neither spoke. It felt enough just to exist in that fragile silence. After a few moments, she said softly, "You don't owe me your time, you know. People like you don't usually visit hospitals twice." Ethan chuckled faintly. "Maybe people like me finally realize money can't buy peace." She looked at him, her eyes a mixture of mischief and melancholy. "Peace isn't something you buy, Ethan. It's something you give." That hit him, deeply. He glanced at her, this woman who had so little yet seemed to understand everything he didn't. "What would you do," he asked, "if you had everything you ever wanted?" She smiled, distant. "I'd give it away. Because sometimes holding too much just makes your hands too heavy to reach for anyone else." They sat there until a nurse called her back in. As she was wheeled away, Ethan caught himself saying, "See you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she echoed with a small wave. He didn't realize it then, but those tomorrows became his anchor. Each day, he visited, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just silence. He watched her tell stories to the kids in the ward, her laughter weaving through the hallways like sunlight breaking through rain clouds. Then one afternoon, while she was sketching on her notepad, he asked, "What are you drawing?" She turned the pad toward him. It was a picture of a small house with two people sitting under a tree. "A dream," she said simply. "A place where no one's sick and no one leaves." He smiled. "That's a beautiful dream." Lily shrugged. "It's all I've got." For the first time, Ethan wanted to change that for her, not out of pity, but out of something deeper, something unfamiliar. He wanted her to see a world beyond these sterile walls. That evening, he met Dr. Patel in the corridor. "She's strong," Ethan said. "She'll beat this, right?" The doctor hesitated. "She's one of the bravest patients I've met. But the truth is," he stopped, lowering his voice, "her condition is terminal. The list she's on, it's the organ recipient list. Her heart's failing." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Her heart?" Dr. Patel nodded. "She's been waiting for years. And now, we're running out of time." The hallway tilted in silence. He felt the air thicken, as though the world itself held its breath. The billionaire, the man with every resource imaginable, stood powerless before one truth. You can't buy a new heartbeat. He didn't go home that night. He sat in his car outside the hospital, watching the lights flicker in her window. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, he made a decision that terrified him, to help her, no matter what it took. Ethan spent the following morning pacing in his office, staring out the window as the city buzzed below. Deals, stocks, meetings, all meaningless now. His assistant entered with a stack of reports, but he waved them away. His thoughts weren't in numbers anymore. They were with a girl in a hospital gown, her laughter fading behind sterile walls. He picked up his phone and called every medical contact he had. "Find me the best cardiologist in the country," he demanded. "Money isn't an issue." By evening, He had arranged consultations, second opinions, even experimental treatment options abroad. Yet when he brought the file to Dr. Patel, the doctor sighed. "I admire your efforts, Mr. Cole, but it's not just a matter of resources. Her heart's too weak to sustain travel, and time isn't on our side." Ethan clenched his jaw. "So we just wait?" Dr. Patel met his eyes. "Sometimes that's all we can do, and hope a donor appears before the list runs out of days." Those words echoed like a countdown in Ethan's mind. Every tick of the clock felt like a grain of sand slipping through his fingers. He visited Lily later that evening. She was sketching again, this time a tree with hearts hanging from its branches. "What's that?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "It's my wish tree. Each heart is someone I met who made me believe life's still beautiful." He glanced at the drawing. "And am I on it?" "Maybe," she teased softly, "but you don't get to know which one." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should make one for yourself, too." Her expression softened. "Oh, I have one. It's just invisible. Every time someone smiles because of me, I feel it grow." The words hit him harder than he expected. Here she was, facing the edge of her life, and still, her focus was on making others happy. That night, Ethan went home and opened a new foundation account in her name, the Lily Heart Foundation. He told his team it would support patients waiting for transplants. But in truth, it was his way of fighting fate. Over the next week, he visited daily, sometimes to read to her, sometimes to sit in silence. Slowly, their conversations grew deeper. She told him about her younger brother, Sam, the boy with the broken arm she used to read to. Their parents had died in an accident years ago, leaving them both to navigate hospitals and foster homes. "I promised him I'd live long enough to see him finish school," she said one afternoon, her voice trembling. "But promises are fragile things, Ethan." He reached for her hand. "Then let me help you keep this one." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You can't save everyone, you know." "Maybe not," he replied, "but I can try to save the one who made me believe again." That moment stretched between them, tender and raw, like time had stopped just to let them breathe in the truth of it. The next morning, Lily was gone from her room. Panic hit him like cold water. He rushed to the nurse's station, voice cracking. "Where is she?" "She's in the ICU," the nurse whispered. "Her heart gave out during the night. They are stabilizing her, but..." She didn't finish. Ethan stumbled toward the glass window of the ICU. Machines surrounded her frail body, wires pulsing like fragile lifelines. The girl who brought color into his gray world now lay pale and still. He pressed his hand against the glass, whispering to no one, "Hold on, Lily, please." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the monitor beeped steadily, each sound a fragile heartbeat of hope. That night, he prayed for the first time in years. Not for success, not for himself, but for a stranger who had taught him what it meant to be human again. Hours passed like shadows stretching across the walls of the ICU. Ethan sat outside her room, unmoving, the paper cup of cold coffee trembling in his hands. Every so often, nurses hurried in and out, whispering words he couldn't make out, words he didn't want to hear. The rhythmic beep of her heart monitor was the only sound keeping him tethered to the moment. He hadn't cried since his father's funeral 15 years ago, but that night, as he watched the rise and fall of a fragile chest, something inside him cracked. When Dr. Patel approached, Ethan stood immediately. "Tell me she's okay." The doctor sighed, rubbing his temples. "She's stable for now, but her heart is barely holding. We've sent urgent requests through every donor network. There's still hope, but we need a match soon." Ethan nodded, jaw tight. "Do whatever it takes, whatever the cost." Patel looked at him kindly. "Some things, Mr. Cole, aren't measured in cost. They are measured in miracles." Those words haunted him as he left the hospital at dawn. Outside, the city was waking up, sunlight spilling between glass towers, cars honking, people rushing to work. The world kept moving, indifferent to the quiet war being fought in room 213. Ethan found himself at a small chapel across the street. He wasn't religious, but something drew him in. The air smelled of old wood and candle wax. He sat on the last bench, staring at the flickering light of a single candle. God, he whispered, unsure if he was talking to anyone at all. If you're real, take whatever you want from me. Just let her live. A janitor sweeping the floor paused and looked up. Sometimes, the old man said gently, the ones who suffer the most are the ones who still teach us how to love. Ethan closed his eyes. Then I've met the right teacher. He went back to the hospital later that morning, determined not to leave her side again. When he walked into her room, she was awake, weak but smiling. You look terrible, she teased softly. He laughed through the exhaustion. You almost died, and that's your first comment. She shrugged. Humor's cheaper than therapy. He sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. You scared me, Lily. I scare myself sometimes, she whispered. Silence followed, heavy but honest. Then she looked at him with quiet curiosity. Why do you keep coming back, Ethan? You barely know me. He hesitated. Because you remind me of who I used to be. Before the money, before the walls I built. Her fingers tightened around his. Then don't lose that again. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I won't. Not if you keep reminding me. She smiled faintly, then turned her gaze toward the window. You know, I used to think people like you lived in a different world. Perfect houses, perfect lives. He followed her gaze. It's not perfect, just quieter, emptier. You can feel it, she said softly. Not with things, with people. Her words settled into his chest like a seed finding soil. That evening, Ethan visited the children's ward where she used to read stories. The little boy, Sam, ran up to him. Are you Miss Lily's friend? Yes, Ethan said gently. She told me all about you. The boy's eyes shone. She said you're her miracle. Ethan froze. She said that. Sam nodded, hugging his stuffed bear. She said you make her forget she's sick. Something inside Ethan broke again, not in pain this time, but in gratitude. When he returned to her room, she was asleep. The nurse smiled softly. You're good for her. You know, she laughs more when you're around. He looked at her, frail, peaceful, still fighting, and whispered, Then I'll keep showing up. As the lights dimmed in the corridor, he sat beside her bed, watching her breathe, vowing silently that he wouldn't let her story end in silence. Because some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to remind you how to live before they leave. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. Days blurred into weeks, and Ethan's visit became as routine as a sunrise. The hospital staff no longer asked who he was. Everyone knew the man in the expensive suit who always brought laughter into room 213. He read to Lily, helped her paint, even played cards with her when her hands stopped trembling long enough to hold them. But behind every smile, a silent fear grew, the uncertainty of time. The donor list hadn't moved. Every day without news felt like another thread slipping loose from a fragile fabric of hope. One evening, as the rain poured outside, Lily sat up and whispered, Then, if I don't make it, promise me you'll still visit Sam sometimes. He frowned, gripping her hand. Don't say that. I need to, she said softly. He'll need someone, and you're kind. He shook his head. You'll tell him that yourself when you get out of here. She smiled sadly. You really do hate reality, don't you? He leaned closer. No, I just refuse to give up before the story's over. Her laugh came out like a sigh. You talk like we're in a movie. Maybe we are, he replied quietly, and you're the only real part of it. The rain softened into a drizzle. Somewhere down the hall, a piano played faintly, a volunteer musician filling the air with fragile notes. Lily closed her eyes, swaying slightly to the melody. Do you hear that? She whispered. It sounds like goodbye. Ethan's throat tightened. No, it sounds like holding on. That night, she fell asleep with her hand in his. He stayed there until dawn, watching the pale light creep across her face. At sunrise, a nurse rushed in, breathless. We just got a call. A heart has been found. It's a potential match. Ethan's eyes widened. For Lily. The nurse nodded. They are confirming compatibility now. He exhaled, emotion flooding through him so hard his knees nearly buckled. He stepped out into the hallway and pressed his back against the wall, whispering, "Thank you." Hours passed like eternity. Doctors and nurses moved in controlled chaos. Lily was prepped for surgery. When she saw him again, she managed a weak grin. "Looks like I'm not done annoying you yet." He laughed through his tears. "Good. I don't like quiet rooms anyway." She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "If this goes wrong." "It won't." "Ethan, listen." Her eyes glistened. "Promise me something. If I don't wake up, use my story. Tell people to love while they still can." He shook his head, choking on his words. "Stop saying that." She smiled faintly. "I just need to know someone will remember." He bent forward and pressed his forehead to hers. "Then I promise. But only because you're going to wake up and remind me how stubborn you are." They wheeled her away soon after, the echo of the stretcher wheels following him down the corridor like a heartbeat fading into distance. Ethan sat outside the operating room for 6 hours. Each minute dragged through him like glass. Every time the red light above the door flickered, his pulse jumped. He prayed, bargained, whispered every promise he could think of to the silence. When the doors finally opened, Dr. Patel stepped out, exhaustion etched deep in his face. Ethan stood immediately, his voice breaking. "Tell me she's okay." The doctor smiled faintly. "The transplant was successful. She made it." Ethan's breath left him in a rush. He turned away, wiping tears before they fell. Relief, pure and raw, flooded through every vein. Later, when he saw her in recovery, pale but breathing, he whispered, "You did it, Lily." Her eyelids fluttered open just enough for a soft whisper. "Told you, story's not over yet." And for the first time in his life, Ethan thanked both fate and faith for keeping her heart and his beating. Weeks passed, and color slowly returned to Lily's cheeks. The once familiar beeping machines around her now sounded like a rhythm of victory. Ethan visited every day, bringing stories from the outside world. The smell of rain on city streets, the laughter of children playing near his office, the sunlight reflecting off his car windshield. He wanted to bring her pieces of life until she could step back into it herself. Lily's strength grew, little by little. Some days she would walk a few steps with help. Others she'd sit by the window, sketching new dreams on paper. One afternoon, Ethan found her drawing the same magnolia tree where they had one Saturday. "You remembered," he said, smiling softly. She looked up. "How could I forget? It's where you first started listening." He chuckled. "I think that's where I first started feeling again." Their conversations became lighter, easier, but beneath the laughter, something unspoken remained. A question neither dared to voice. What happens now? Dr. Patel entered one morning with good news. The recovery is going beautifully. Another week or two, and she can go home. Ethan's heart leaped. "That's incredible." Lily smiled, but there was hesitation behind it. "Home," she repeated softly, eyes drifting to the window. "I don't even know where that is anymore." "You'll find it," Ethan said gently. "And if you can't, I'll help you build one." Her eyes met his. "You mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." Something in that moment shifted, fragile, yet certain. Love, quiet and real, had rooted itself between them like a promise. The day she was discharged, the entire ward gathered to say goodbye. The children she used to read to gave her hand-drawn cards. The nurses hugged her. Dr. Patel smiled proudly. But as she stepped outside for the first time in months, she froze. The sunlight was too bright, the noise too sharp. Ethan saw the tremble in her hand and gently offered his arm. "One step at a time," he whispered. She took it, both the step and his hand. He drove her to a small lakeside cottage he owned on the city's edge. "It's quiet here," he said. "You'll heal faster." She turned toward him, her eyes soft. "You're really doing all this for me?" He nodded. "You'd do the same." "I would," she said, smiling faintly. "But I didn't think anyone ever would for me." He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You were wrong." They spent the next few weeks there, walking by the water, cooking simple meals, watching sunsets melt into the horizon. She began to laugh again, freely this time. And sometimes, when she caught him watching her, she'd say, "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" he'd ask, amused. "Like you're afraid I'll disappear." He never had an answer for that. Then one morning, she found an envelope on the table. Inside was a check with her name, the Lily Hart Foundation. Beneath it, a note in Ethan's handwriting. "Your story will save others now." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, you can't just—" He smiled. "I already did." Before she could speak, his phone rang. He stepped outside to answer, his face growing pale as he listened. When he returned, Lily saw it in his eyes. Something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, then said, "The doctor called. They ran one final compatibility test. The donor heart, it came from someone who didn't survive a car crash 2 towns over." She blinked. "That's tragic. But why do you look like that?" He swallowed hard. "Because the donor's name was Grace Cole." Her breath caught. "Cole? Yo." "My sister," he whispered, voice breaking. She was the one." The world went still. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from a sorrow too deep for words. She reached for his trembling hand. "Ethan," she whispered, "your sister saved me." He nodded, tears falling freely. "And you saved me." The air between them felt sacred. 2 souls bound by loss and mercy, by love born from pain neither had chosen. That evening, they lit a candle by the lake, the flame dancing in the reflection of the water. Ethan whispered his sister's name once, softly, and Lily closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her chest, to the heartbeat that once belonged to Grace. Neither spoke for a long time. There was nothing left to say, only the sound of the wind and the steady rhythm of one heart keeping 2 lives alive. The next morning arrived with a quiet stillness. The lake shimmered under the pale sunrise, and the smell of wet earth drifted through the open windows. Ethan brewed coffee in the kitchen, the soft hum of the machine almost soothing, until he saw her standing outside on the porch, barefoot, her hospital bracelet still dangling from her wrist. She was staring at the horizon, hands folded over her heart. When he stepped closer, she whispered, "It's strange. I can feel her sometimes. Not in a ghostly way. Just warmth, like she's reminding me to live for both of us." He swallowed hard. Grace always wanted to help people. She used to say her heart was too big for her body. Lily turned toward him with tears in her eyes. "And now it beats for someone else." Ethan nodded. "She'd be proud it found you." Silence lingered, filled with unspoken gratitude and grief. Then, slowly, she leaned against him. For a moment, 2 broken people simply breathed together, healing, quietly. Days turned into months. Lily began volunteering at the same hospital she once called home. She read to the children again, her laughter echoing through the same corridors that once held her pain. The nurses would smile and whisper, "She's our miracle." Ethan often waited for her in the garden, beneath the magnolia tree. He no longer wore suits there, just soft sweaters, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Money still moved his world, but love now shaped it. One afternoon, he found her sitting with Sam, showing him how to fold paper cranes. "Each one is a wish," she explained to the boy. "If you make 1,000, it means hope never dies." Ethan watched quietly, his chest swelling with pride and awe. She had turned her pain into purpose. When Sam ran off to show the other children his cranes, Ethan sat beside her. "You never stop giving," he said softly. She smiled. Neither did Grace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of his sister on one side and Lily, sleeping in her hospital bed, on the other. "I had this made," he said. 2 hearts, 1 life. Her eyes filled with tears as she traced the edge of the locket with trembling fingers. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he whispered. "You already say it every day, just by being here." For a long while, they sat there in the late afternoon light, the magnolia petals drifting like slow snow around them. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder why all this happened," she murmured. "Why so much pain had to make way for something beautiful." Ethan took her hand. "Maybe because some love stories are written in scars, not fairy tales." Her lips curved into a small, wistful smile. Then I guess ours was carved deep enough to last. That night, they returned to the cottage. Lily sat by the fireplace, sketching quietly as Ethan read from one of her favorite books. The flames danced against the walls, and for once, everything felt still, not because life had paused, but because it had finally found peace. When she finished sketching, she handed him the drawing. It showed two hearts entwined by a single thread, one glowing slightly brighter. At the bottom, she had written, "One gave life, one learned to live." Ethan's throat tightened. You always find the perfect words. She smiled faintly, maybe because I know what it's like to almost lose them. He reached out, brushing her hand. You'll never lose them again. But deep down, he still feared the fragility of it all, how quickly life could shift, how easily light could dim. The next morning, Lily wasn't by the window where she usually sat today. Ethan found her outside instead, sitting beneath the magnolia tree again. Her eyes were closed, her face turned toward the sky, the breeze teasing strands of her hair. "Morning," he said softly. She opened her eyes slowly and smiled. "It's beautiful today." He nodded, sitting beside her. "You are." Her cheeks flushed, and she leaned her head on his shoulder again. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think I was dying when you met me. But now I think I was just waiting to live." Ethan smiled through the ache that filled his chest. "Then live, Lily. For her. For me. For you." The magnolia petals fell gently around them, each one catching a glint of sunlight before settling on the grass, a soft reminder that even endings can look like beginnings. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Seasons changed. The lake froze and thawed, the magnolia tree bloomed and withered again, and still, Lily's laughter filled the little cottage like light that refused to dim. Her health improved, her cheeks gained color, and the hospital became a place she visited to volunteer, not to survive. Ethan, once the untouchable billionaire whose life was built on marble and glass, now spent his mornings cooking breakfast for two and his evenings planting trees in Grace's name. They had built something fragile yet eternal, a quiet rhythm of healing. One evening, as twilight painted the water in amber, Lily found Ethan sitting on the porch, staring at the lake. "You've been quiet all day," she said softly, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. He smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About her?" He nodded. "About how life took her, but gave me you." She sat beside him. "Grief and love aren't enemies, Ethan. They hold hands. One reminds us why the other matters." He looked at her, eyes shimmering with emotion. "You always know what to say." "That's because I lived where words were all I had left," she whispered. They sat together, listening to the sound of crickets and distant waves. After a while, she said, "Do you think we ever stop missing the ones we lose?" He shook his head slowly. "No. We just learn to love them differently, through the people they save, the stories they leave behind." She smiled gently. "Then Grace is still here." He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "And always will be." That night, Ethan wrote in his journal for the first time in years, something Lily had convinced him to do. The entry read, "She taught me that wealth isn't what fills your hands, but what fills your heart. That some miracles wear scars, and some love stories begin in hospitals, not fairy tales. And maybe, just maybe, the richest man alive isn't the one who owns the world, but the one who's finally learned how to give it away." Months later, the Lily Heart Foundation launched officially, supporting transplant patients across the country. The media called it a revolution of compassion, but Ethan never stood on stage. He let Lily tell the story. She spoke with trembling hands, her voice steady yet emotional. "There was a time," she began, "when I thought my name on a list meant the end. But someone's kindness and someone's heart gave me a new beginning. I'm alive because love refused to give up, and I promise to keep that love alive for others who are still waiting." Applause thundered through the hall. Ethan watched from the crowd, tears sliding down his face unnoticed. He saw grace in her smile and hope in her eyes. After the event, Lily found him backstage and whispered she'd be proud of us, wouldn't she? He pulled her close. No, Lily, she is proud of us. That evening, they returned home to the cottage, their quiet sanctuary. The magnolia tree stood tall under the moonlight, petals glowing faintly like fallen stars. Lily lit 2 candles by the window, one for the past, one for the promise of tomorrow. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. You know, he murmured, I used to think love was something that happened in moments, at first sight, or in grand gestures. But you taught me it's in the quiet things, the waiting, the forgiving, the staying. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening. And you taught me that even broken hearts can still beat beautifully. He smiled through tears. Then we saved each other. Lily nodded, and maybe that's what love was meant to do all along. They stood there, holding each other as the night wrapped around them. Not as a billionaire and a patient, but as 2 souls who had walked through pain and found grace on the other side. The wind carried the scent of magnolia blossoms through the air, soft and sweet. Lily closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm in her chest. Grace's gift, Ethan's reason, her own rebirth. And for the first time in forever, everything felt whole.